Welcome back to our second episode of Contributor Conversations. HousingWire's contributor platform is one of the best places in the industry for housing professionals, visionaries, and thought leaders to share insights, analysis, and practical advice. This series gives our contributors space to circle back and go deeper on their ideas and to respond directly to feedback and questions from you, our audience. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lee Davenport, a real estate broker, coach, and fair housing advocate who has built her career at the intersection of coaching and fair and equitable housing. Dr. Lee writes and trains extensively on race, fairness, and real estate, helping housing professionals across brokerage, lending, appraisals, and leadership turn fair housing from theory into a daily practice. In this episode, we're going to dig into what equitable housing really looks like on the ground, where our industry's biggest blind spots still are, and how individual professionals can grow their business while actively advancing fair and accessible housing. Dr. Davenport, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Zeb. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this conversation. You and I have known each other through email for about, a year and a half, 2 years. You were one of the first op-eds that I published whenever I came here, but this is our first time meeting face-to-face or screen-to-screen, rather.
Right. I do feel like we are old friends at this point, but yes, to actually have eyes on you is great. It's just great.
Well, again, I very much appreciate you taking the time. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
So you've built a career at the intersection of both coaching and fair housing. And I'm curious, and the feedback that I've received from much of our readers is they want to know where or what first lit that fire around fair and equitable housing for you. And was there a moment when it stopped being interesting and became like a non-negotiable for you?
That is so good and so interesting. So long story short, I grew up in a real estate family. And when I say that, I mean I always call my parents mom and pop investors because they're literally my mom and pop investors. So I am an only child, which I always say, unfortunately, because that meant when tenants trashed a place, I was the cleanup crew. If the grass needed to be cut, I was the lawn care company. So I started putting up, blinds, everything, anything. I was the crew. So I didn't have any siblings to share the wealth with. And I would say even as a kid, I started to notice things. As a kid, you don't quite understand why certain people aren't allowed in certain areas or why even, for example, a area may not be as welcoming to children coming to live in the area, why it's hard for someone in a wheelchair to have access to a community and area. It's so many things. And so as a kid, it always piqued my interest. And I know my parents have always tried to do things fair, but that didn't mean that it was necessarily easy, particularly when it comes to the cost of financing. So again, long story short, I grew up in real estate and I always wondered why not everyone had the same access and opportunity for a myriad of reasons. So that was my passion and my starting place. And then as an adult, even though, again, I was kind of, I won't say afraid to get into real estate, but I didn't want to do it just because, again, I grew up doing more of the grunt work for my parents and they paid me. But as an adult, I realized, now I get it. I see how lucrative it can be once I started to actually see the checks and the money and everything. But as an adult, again, just starting to work with families on the sales side, not just on property management and from a rental standpoint, but then even on the sales side here in Metro Atlanta, which is where I live, I started to again notice that there were various reasons why not everyone had access and opportunity. So me being a little bit of a busybody and a little nosy made me kind of pry into, well, what's going on? How can we make this more equitable for everyone? And that started my long descent into maybe a little of madness, but fair housing and
Yeah.
as much as we can possibly do to make it more equitable.
Okay, so you describe yourself as a fair housing equalizer, and when you write and teach on race and fairness and real estate across, you do it across a lot of platforms. How do you define how do you define it in a day to day practice, and why does that matter beyond avoiding violations? Because it's been, from my experience, I've been in the industry for 15, 16 years now, that some people think of fair housing more of like a compliance box to check, even though that's not an actual compliance box, but metaphorically. So how do you define this in the day-to-day practice?
That's so good. And I don't, having been on the sales side, the management side, the property management side, the investor side, I don't fault people when we put it in that checkbox category, because it is a lot to manage. I know a lot of people are solopreneurs in real estate.
Mhm.
Some people have teams so they can delegate things, but so many of us, we have to wear all these hats and it gets overwhelming. So you do, unfortunately, some parts of your business can become check boxes. But what I always like to encourage is that more than compliance is important. I don't want to underestimate that, but I think more than anything, we're in a people business. I know all of us, we get that. It is so important for people to know, like, and trust us. That's a typical business moniker, the know, like, and trust. And to do that, it is so vital for many of us. We want to be a family's, real estate provider for their life. Some of us even put that in our tagline. But for that to happen and for people to sing our praises and be willing to refer us to their friends, family, neighborhoods, and coworkers, there has to be this baseline understanding of, hey, this isn't for you as the professional, whether it's mortgage, whether you're in sales, property management. This isn't just a transaction. You don't just see me as a compliance check. You don't just see me as a number. You don't see me as a paycheck. You see me as, this may be the biggest transaction of my life, which is
Right.
scary. You see that this is going to affect me, my children, maybe my parents if they're living with us, right? So you see this beyond a transaction, which it is, but it's so much
Mhm.
more than that. And for me, that means we also recognize that the fairness, the equity, the opportunity, the access that's required is also now a component. So again, we're not isolated, even though it's hard. Again, I don't want to minimize that we
Mhm.
juggle a lot, but it is still so vital for us to actually remember that these are people, that this is their home. This is where, whether people are single, whether they're raising families, no matter what, this is still where they want to be able to lay their head down at night and have
Right.
peace and safety. So the long story short is, I like for us to, yes, acknowledge that this is a career. We do have regulations to follow, but more importantly, just like us, this person that we're working with, this is, for many of us, again, this is tied into our livelihood. This is, could extend our lifetime, right? So
Right.
based off of where we live, the schools we have access to, the stores and grocery stores and all of those things that are in the community. So it's so much bigger, is my point.
Yeah. Well, so where do you see right now the biggest gaps or blind spots in how real estate and housing professionals show up, let's say, in fair housing? And that can be, you can pick anyone. It can be agents or a lender or even, leadership at large. What's the biggest gap or blind spot?
I think one of the biggest things that would probably help our industry as a whole, again, including appraisers, lenders, real estate agents, sales agents, is to recognize that although we, like me and my business, I may never cross these lines, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's not happening. I feel like that may be one of the biggest points that when I'm teaching classes or we're doing trainings and webinars, a lot of times I'm preaching to the choir. The people that I'm talking to or that are reading articles, they get it. They're like, yeah, I would never do this. It almost makes me think of, I'm going to date myself here. For those of us that were, I would probably say at least teenagers or maybe even children in the 1980s, there were the commercials of, where they crack the egg and they're like, this is your brain and this
Oh
is your
yeah.
brain on drugs. And
Oh yeah.
oftentimes that it became a joke for many comedians because it's like
Hmm.
people who aren't going to probably ever have this issue, they're the ones watching this. But the people
Yep.
who kind of quote need it, they don't see those commercials. They're not seeing the Dare t-shirts. So I
Hmm.
feel kind of the same way. But what that means is that because our listeners, our readers are the people that get it, it almost means we've kind of got to be the evangelists to the other people that are in our office, are in our sphere. Maybe not our office. I know our offices are great. So maybe not our offices, but maybe at conferences, maybe someone on the other side of the transaction.
Hmm.
This is where I think for many of us, it's not an issue of we don't know what to do, nor that we're not trying. It's just that how do we be positive influences without starting a fight?
Right.
Not that this
Right.
topic will cause people to fight, but just in general.
So you work closely with organizations on fair housing, DEI, and I see this industry. I mean, they'll quickly adopt things that are trendy and buzzwordy, right? And then grow tired of them or become overwhelmed whenever they actually try to implement some sort of change, systemic change.
Yeah.
So, what mindsets or habits have you seen that really move the needle inside team and companies when it comes to, you know, DEI and fair housing practices and policies and philosophies? So it's not just a buzzword. It's not something that they assume and then like, oh crap, I'm gonna if we're gonna really implement this, then we
Right.
might have to change a few things, and they kind of toss it aside.
Right.
Great in theory, but not going to do it in practice. What habits move that needle?
Yeah. I love that. And one of the books that I'm revisiting right now, I am a nerd, so I try to reread some books. One of my
Mhm.
favorites that I'm revisiting is Atomic Habits. So I love that
Yeah.
you pulled out that word habit because I do think, and I'm a gym rat. I was a runner in school, and so it does take instead of again, because like I said, I recognize so many of us have so many hats. So the big picture can be overwhelming at times. So it does come down to what are the little things I can do day by day. And then when you look back, you're like, oh, wow, we really did accomplish a lot. So, one of the things that I love, and I've gotten a chance to do this with some of the realtor associations, the state based associations, I love during our award season, which is right now, this is that time of year, the first of the year, first quarter, whether it's from the Oscars to, again, our companies, we're giving out awards. I love that when we can, instead of always making it compliance, you're getting your hand hit because you did something wrong. Let's talk about who's doing the right things. Maybe this
Mhm.
person has gone out of their way again to make sure someone who maybe needs wheelchair access. They've done all of these things to ensure that they're working with various partners that can help this person have access and opportunity. So, awards, that's one of my first things that I feel like so many companies, teams as well as associations can do. Again, whether it's mortgage, whether it's appraisers, whether it's
Mhm.
sales agents, it's something that can get people. I always call it, I know it's typically called the carrot and stick. I call it carrot
Mhm.
cake. I don't like carrots, but carrot cake. So it's that positive incentive.
Yeah.
So to create awards, I would say that would be one of the easiest, smallest things that we could do annually
Okay.
and get people excited about fair housing.
Okay. Well, I've got a follow up question that's similar in nature, but kind of from a bottom up, right? That's kind of from the top, from like leadership at the branch level or at an office level, top down. But for an individual that's listening to this, could be an agent, loan originator, whomever, who cares about these issues, but they don't really know how to start. What uh, what I don't know. Again, one or two concrete actions could they take this quarter? You're talking about Q1 to make their piece or where they fit into the housing ecosystem more fair and more accessible.
I love that. So, one of the other things that I've actually been challenging people to do this year for Q1 is to, if you don't know the history of the area that you're servicing, learn
Mhm.
about it. So, what that
Okay.
means is take a look. There are different free websites that can tell you, was this community redlined? Or was this an area where neighborhoods, communities were destroyed in order to build the freeway system or to build
Mhm.
roads? Or was this even an area where, well, there's so many things. Was this an area where professionals? So, again, maybe you're, again, a part of, it could be an association, again, as the individual. What was the history in this area? Were professionals welcomed from all different backgrounds? So there are some places where women for a long time couldn't get involved in certain things. So to look at those things first. So first identify what was the history of the area that I'm servicing. And then, two, based off of that history, so you may learn that there were some demographics that were maybe historically excluded, or again, maybe a whole community was demolished.
Mhm.
Based off of that, oftentimes there are existing organizations that are trying to remedy some
Right.
of those issues. So now you get an opportunity to, again, you're still connecting with the community, which is great. Going back to what I mentioned about getting people to know, like, and trust us, all of us at any point in time, we should be connecting with the community. So this gives us a chance to connect with some of the organizations that may be trying to remedy some of the issues that were specific to real estate, to mortgages and so,
Yeah.
appraisals and so forth. So now we can join these organizations, see how maybe our team can help, how I as an individual can help, which a lot of times that means sweat equity.
I think well, I think people are down for sweat equity. Like, I think it's far. A lot of the times, I feel like, just in my experience with people, that with something like this, we mentioned a little bit, get overwhelmed. Like they think that they got to put on their Superman cape and then go out and like they don't. That's far too big of a task, and they don't know where to go anyway. But what you're talking about, know the area that you live in, educate the area, become educated on the area which you live in, and then plug into an existing infrastructure, right? And serve.
Yep.
And that's because you serve there in order to serve, further down the line. And I think most people are far that's an easier inroad and far more willing to do that rather than, like I said, kind of go out on your own to try to enact some sort of change. And you're like, man, I have no idea. Just plug into a local network or a local structure that has a history that already works and just be of service there. And then down the road, more opportunities will unveil themselves.
10,000%. Here in Atlanta, we have several organizations that are doing that. And I know that's the case in various parts of the country. And to your point, if it does feel overwhelming, or maybe you're in maybe more of a rural area where there's not, maybe as now there usually are, though, I would say, based off of just some of the fair housing organizations, I believe there's one in kind of every county. But still,
Yeah.
if it's just, again, not feasible based on your schedule and so forth, even with that, even starting or participating in book clubs, online things, because some of these organizations, again, me being a nerd, they host like online book clubs so that you're reading about the history of the area. I'm in one right now, and we're reading about how Atlanta was unfortunately segregated, and the issues that caused. But I didn't start the book club. I'm just reading with everyone, and
Yeah.
we're in community to discuss it. So I like people to, especially in these times, I don't ever want people to take for granted that being in community with
Mhm.
people, learning about it, being in community, that is something. We don't always have to feel like,
Right.
we're in a march or something. Not to
Yeah.
say those things don't matter too, but learning and still being a part of the community and being more knowledgeable, that
Mhm.
goes a long way in our industry, because we are supposed to be kind of the historians in a sense, as we talk about the homes, to actually understand even the people that live
Right.
there. That's powerful.
I agree. What do you think, looking down the road, next 5 to 10 years, let's say, what would you like to see become, I guess, normal in U.S. housing in reference to fair and equitable housing?
Yeah, okay. So I have so many things on my wish list, but I would say maybe the more attainable. I've got like some lofty goals, of course,
Hmm.
but the more attainable thing is that I don't I don't necessarily feel like it's the goal should be that this never happens, that we never have issues and infringements. I don't think that's realistic, because we're all human. Things can
Right.
happen. But what I would love to see, my wish would be that people better understand, people being our customers, our clients, they better understand their rights, and they are swift to say, hey, this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
Because and the reason why I say that is because so often we've come across people who, well, I'll give you one example. So, this was maybe a decade ago, but I still hear it in passing. But there was an elderly woman, she was about 90 years old, and she was buying for herself in her own name her first home. And again, we had laws through the 70s, but even though there were laws that said, hey, even as a woman, you can get credit, you can buy a home, there were still, unfortunately, I guess, an unwritten rule in some places where some people still believed, hey, as a woman, no, I have to have a male co-signer. I have to have a male on name somewhere. So anyway, the fact that we did just an information session, as we all tend to do, some type of buyer session, anyway,
Mhm.
explain this, and she was flabbergasted. She was like, seriously, I'm 90, did not understand this. So coming back to my point, it's the education piece. If people
Yeah.
still recognize the rights that they have when it comes to fair and affordable housing, and then they're quick to say, hey, that infringes on my rights, I would actually be a happy camper. That would make me
Right.
extremely happy. So education and knowledge, that's our
Understood.
power.
All right. Well, Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time and enjoyed this conversation. We're going to have to schedule another one soon.
Because I'm a yapper, but thank you for having me, Zeb. This is great.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.